Welcome to the Baraza Banter podcast. Grab a cup of tea and maybe even some mandazi and join us on our journey as we change the world one sip at a time. So, after reading the title of this episode, you might be wondering, what is spiritual trauma?
So, before the episode begins, we want to make it clear that spirituality is not inherently linked to trauma, and we do not intend for them to be associated with each other. However, in these episodes, we are sharing people's experiences with relation to spirituality to address this topic and to provide solutions at a personal and communal level to the best of our abilities. Okay, on to the episode.
So, spiritual trauma is a result of events that damage our spiritual values and goals. It can be caused by many instances and experiences, and today we are going to tackle trauma caused by incorrect education and negative methods of teaching.
Okay, so a little disclaimer before we start. We're personally not experts in the field of trauma or mental health. However, we are in contact with experts who we will refer to throughout the series. This is more of an open discussion to normalize speaking about spiritual trauma and work towards healing together, like the title of our podcast, Baraza Banter. We're encouraging topics like these in barazas. So pretend we're your friends or your sisters, providing a new perspective and helping you through your struggles.
So, for this episode, however, we do have our very own teacher, Fadiha, who will be able to give us some professional insight into how the lack of education can result in spiritual trauma.
We'd like to also appreciate everyone that has sent in their responses and have felt like this is a safe place where they can share their vulnerabilities. We want you all to know that we're so thankful for this opportunity to help in some way or form, and we'll definitely be doing our best to respond to each and every one of them, inshallah.
So, this is one of the responses that we've received, which shows how lack of education can result in such a damaging or basically such a traumatic experience. It says, a friend opened up to me about her child's experience. It was so sad. This is what she said to me. Her son has OCD now over Taharat. He finds things so difficult that sometimes he talks about giving up on life. She has done everything she can to show him God is merciful and so kind. He went for a short Hausa course and came out with spiritual trauma. It's so sad. She had a vision for her children to go to Hausa, and now she's really scared. She doesn't want to repeat with her other children. I couldn't bear her pain and what she's going through and watching her child feeling so overwhelmed every day at such a young age.
So just to clarify, because I remember the first time I read this, I was a little bit confused about the order of events. So what happened was her son went to this Hausa course and came out with the spiritual trauma, which then resulted in OCD over Tahara. It's a very heavy one because of course he mentions giving up on life, which is really hard for us to even like read as well. I think it just emphasizes the importance of teaching religion in the right way.
So I think this is a really interesting passage because it's quite ironic in a way. Like we might think that, okay, solving such problems, that the place to go is religious seminaries or, like majlises or lectures, or, that's the place to be. But in reality, it's the foundation that we often forget. Like there was a course in Mahdawiya that I was attending more recently, and our teacher, he mentioned a beautiful point. He said that knowledge, so it's a three-way process. He said knowledge is the basis for everything. Once you have the correct knowledge is when the love will follow and then the action will follow. And I think in this case, him attending the Hausa was perhaps his niyat was right? Even his mom's, as she said that she had the same vision for her children. But it was the misinterpretation of that information that then resulted in the lack of love, which resulted in a confused form of action, if that makes sense. So basically his OCD, there was something that went wrong with that piece of information, due to which his love for Taharat and for the religion wasn't just pure love that, okay, I'm doing this for the sake of Allah, but in fact it was, Ya Khuda, I have to do this. Ya Khuda, is this right? Is this wrong? Like that fear that, oh my God, if I don't do this, then, if I haven't covered a part in my wudu, then my whole namaz for the rest of the day, for the rest of the week, and, this, it's going to be invalid, etc., etc. Yes, I agree that certain our rulings are strict, But God's not sitting out there on a throne saying, okay, all right, she missed a spot on her elbow. All right, definitely she's black points for this. He's really, the fact that we say that techniques of making God happy, that line itself makes it sound like as if God's sitting annoyed at someone. When did anyone ever say that he's annoyed or he's angry that we should make him happy? In fact, we should say that we should make God him even happier, not something that would make him happy, because that just makes him sound like he's frowning, he's just really terrifying God. So I think that the problem over here was with the knowledge that was passed on. What do you guys think?
Yeah, definitely it's the knowledge that's being passed on in the wrong way and emphasizing the details so much that the point of what we're doing gets lost. Like for example, in Sheikh Jawad Shamali's lectures last year in Muharram, he mentioned teaching religion with love instead of forcing it on kids, right? And making them overwhelmed with all the small little things that they forget what they're actually doing. So when they grow up, then they're like, what was the point of all of that? Right? Because they don't understand why they're doing it.
So actually, I think I have a little story to tell. So you know how in madrasas we usually have a lot of tests and exams testing our wudu and our ghusl and all this relating to taharat and najasat. And I feel like, of course, it's important for teachers to make sure that their students are performing the acts correctly. But I feel like all these tests really put a lot of emphasis on the little details, as you said, instead of explaining the reason why we're doing this. And I feel like Syed Asad Jafri does this really well. In his majlis, he mentioned that wudu should be a form of relaxation and a form of preparation for prayer.
If I was a madrasa teacher and let's say I was listening to you, I would perhaps say that, well, it's important for us to emphasize on those little points. And, those points are mentioned in their salat, in basically in our fiqh laws as well. So why shouldn't we focus on those points?
I'm saying that, of course, it's important and we should make sure that our students are performing it correctly. But there should also be an emphasis on why we're doing wudu.
Exactly. I feel like before the action, the knowledge should come first. That okay, what's the benefit of putting water on your hand? Like as an example, the scientific benefit of putting water from your elbow to your wrist is basically that it freshens, it awakens you. There are certain nerves, there's certain muscles in that on that part that if you pour water in them, it awakens your body, which basically makes you ready for the namaz that you're about to pray. So if you prepare children and teach them with this mindset, they will want to go and they will work on making their wudu better instead of just pat and go and pray just because I have to, right?
Yeah, it's the way in which we teach our children. Like, if we are so focused on, oh, you're doing this wrong, instead of teaching them, okay, maybe we can learn it this way, or like always reminding them that, it doesn't have to be perfect because that's how OCD happens, right? Like, when we focus too much on everything being perfect, that's where we fall. And as human beings, yes, we have that natural drive to be perfect, but as Sayyid Asad Jafri always says, that Allah is the ultimate perfection. We can try and reach perfection, but we cannot be. Allah is so merciful that if you make a mistake, it's fine. Like He's not gonna punish you for just making one small little mistake, and then that's why you got one or two less marks on your wuzu test. I think it's also important to mention over here because she's saying that I couldn't bear the pain of watching like her child feel so overwhelmed and like she doesn't want it to repeat with her other children. But because she's mentioning something so serious like her son wanting to give up on life, it's also important to get the right help. Like if you need mental help, then you should go out and get it because it's better than regretting it or like, sending your child to Hausa or like other solutions that might just keep it limited for now. Like the symptoms may not show much, but then it can get really bad if serious action is not taken. Like with all the responses that we're going to be talking about, I think it's important to have a balance. Like you get the mental help that you need from a specialized licensed person, and you also try and build your journey with God at the same time.
100%. Also, I wanted to add on that if anyone who is listening to this has had any issues with najasat and taharat, not necessarily to the level of OCD, but just constantly thinking about it, Sayyid Asad Jafri puts it really well when he says to take the certainty and leave the doubt. So let's say the last thing that you remember is that you broke your wudu, but you're not really sure. Take the certainty that you actually did break your wudu and then do your wudu. And then the same way if it's the opposite way around. I know that it's easier said than done, but it's important to keep reminding yourself of that.
And on the topic of madrasas, Zahra, do you want to read our next response first?
Okay, so this person says, when a new student joined our Sunday school madrasa class, I remember the teacher asking her what day Imam Hussein was martyred on her first day of class with us. When she didn't give that correct answer and said she didn't know, she was scolded. She was told, how can you not know the day on which Imam Hussein was killed? Our supposed teacher questioned her identity as a Shia Muslim for not knowing such quote unquote basic information and embarrassed her in front of the other students. That girl never came to Sunday school ever again after, and understandably so, but it was just so unfortunate that she was treated that way. Being so young myself, I couldn't possibly defend her against the adults in the situation, aka our supposed teacher. I think the traditional Pakistani teaching style, which my parents are accustomed to, by the way, is super toxic, and the teachers should be much more heavily vetted. In retrospect, I can't believe we had somebody like that teaching middle school and high school aged children in Ontario, Canada. It's so irresponsible and can permanently ruin a child's chance at building a relationship with their faith altogether. Even now, I see Sunday schools getting any school teacher they can get their hands on sometimes to volunteer their time and teach students. This isn't a job for anybody, though, and I don't know why they don't understand that. This is one of the main reasons why you'll never catch me teaching in a Sunday school. Now that I'm older, I realize how wrong it all was. I also noticed that a lot of resentment and anger I often feel towards my religion stemmed from these kinds of experiences with that same teacher and other community members. When we're young, we heavily rely and look up to our teachers as role models. We convince ourselves that this is what Islam is and what a good Muslim is. We have this cruel and distorted misrepresentation of God, no knowledge of the basic aqaid and belief, no relationship with our faith, and are instead forced to memorize and regurgitate fiqh laws or surahs. While these topics may be worthy of study, there is so much more that needs to be done on a foundational level. It's frustrating that as an adult, I've had to destroy the idea of God I had in my head growing up and start all over again. I pray that Allah guides the younger generation of Muslims and gives them the strength and courage to put aside their preconceived notions of faith to discover His true essence. Thanks for listening to my TED Talk.
This thing, whenever I hear this or read this, it just breaks my heart into a million pieces because, as you know, I'm a teacher and I am super passionate about education. Like that's my life, and this is actually one of the reasons I became a teacher because I saw it so much in our community that it was just, and wow, this is just so sad. It's gonna take me a minute.
You know, I don't blame her. I don't blame her with the fact that she said, I've had to destroy the idea of God that I had in my head, because the first thing that we need to start with as soon as a doubt comes in our mind is to unlearn what we already know. Not in the sense that, okay, fine, unlearn, yani, if I know that I'm supposed to be praying namaz, I kabisa, like I stop praying, I stop fasting, I stop doing everything that I'm supposed to. But basically, we need to unlearn and then start learning the right information once we found a source of right information. So first find the source, unlearn, and then relearn. Because the amount of things that, you know, that she's mentioned that she's come across, they're completely right. And I don't blame her for the fact that the idea of God was fed to her wrongly in the first, in the first instance. Anyone would do that.
Yeah, and especially the first question which the teacher asked, like, how can you not know the day on which Imam Hussein was killed? And this is a new student in class. And to embarrass her like that, I don't like I'm just speechless, and I don't even blame the girl for not coming back. Because what kind of environment is that, right? What kind of environment are we encouraging our kids learning in?
Yeah, another thing I've noticed a lot in madrasas is judgment. Like this person said in their story, that like this young child who just joined madrasa was judged for not knowing enough about Imam Hussein, let's say. And I think in the same way, some students are judged for not knowing enough, and some students are judged for knowing too much, and in that way they're put on a pedestal and they're kind of ignored, like we don't really need to ask her questions because she knows so much. And I think this judgment, it can cause a rift in the environment that the students are learning in, and it can also be harmful towards the students' education because of the teacher's attitude towards them.
All right. So Filia, as a teacher that has taught at schools, at madrasa, what is something that you would provide as a solution, or what's something that you think needs to be introduced?
So I think it comes from where she talked about this isn't a job for anybody, and the fact that Sunday schools, they'll just take whatever they get, right? It's because they're so desperate they can't find anybody that has that sort of commitment or to volunteer, that they just take anybody, and then it results in such heavy spiritual trauma, which then leads to other things, which is really sad to see. So for me, I think the solution would be, and I've been saying this for so long now, that I think we need to move madrasa teaching roles from a volunteer position to a professional paid position where we hire professionally trained teachers. Or even like, for example, how the Tarbiyah curriculum is going on right now, the MC curriculum. They are training their teachers in a way that they actually have a certification, and then they go back and teach, right, which is a step in the right direction. But I really think that it needs to move from a volunteer to a paid position, because then we have dedicated staff, right? Like right now we have volunteers who come every Saturday, volunteer, or Sunday, and volunteer their time to madrasa, and we can't, because they're volunteer, we can't really expect so much from them. Yeah, everybody has life going on, people can't commit maybe to so much, and sometimes they slack, right, which we can't really blame them on. But once we move it to a paid position, then that gives them a certain role, and now they have a responsibility. Like, well, as volunteers we have a responsibility too, but there's no one that's there to like question them or make sure that they're in line.
I definitely agree with the training part, Filia. Like, they definitely need to be told exactly what the age group that they're going to be catering to. They need to be trained as to what they're going to be teaching as well, so that they know, okay, this is right. So it's even a, it's a benefit for them as well, that okay, I'm learning, and simultaneously I want to be the catalyst of change, not the catalyst that results in passing on the wrong information that I've been passed on.
Yeah, and I think when you come into the role of being a teacher, especially in madrasa, you have to come in with the mentality, and I think this needs to be introduced to anybody that is joining madrasa as a teacher, maybe even now when we're like, still in volunteer positions, they need to have that mentality that they have a huge responsibility. It's so huge that we are really impacting our kids now, and whatever they take from us now, they're going to use it later on, right? So if we are not as knowledgeable enough, we need to work on that. We need to become as more knowledgeable. We need to figure out what do the kids of today need in our society to grow and function and to keep their base of religion strong. What do they need? We need to figure that out first, and then teach our kids, because our madrasas need to be more related to our whole life, right? Islam is a lifestyle. I feel like it's so separated from our daily lives that we feel like they're two separate things.
It's important, and this point is actually even mentioned in the book, from marriage to parenthood. The point basically says that it's a hadith by the Holy Prophet, if I'm not mistaken, and it says that with a child, become a child when doing their tarbiyah, and that includes looking at the challenges that your child is facing as well when you sort of become a child with your child. And that's when it'll allow you to look at the issues that your child is facing, and then you can tackle it accordingly, instead of giving the child solutions that were used in your day and age, right? Because right now the child will then start backfiring, and then there's going to be that, the generation gap and the problems that basically follow as a cascade. But in essence, we should basically get down to their mentality and target exactly the problems that we need to. Otherwise, our targets are going to waste, and so is our time and energy.
Yeah, and if we're not learning as teachers and we're not growing, then what are we teaching our kids? We're teaching them ancient stuff. Like, we need to move on as a community together, right? That's the whole point. It's teaching and learning. When we're learning to teach, we usually learn about the positive behavioral system. And that basically emphasizes the fact that we need to create an environment where children thrive. And we can do that by focusing on praising them for the good things that they do and helping them with the things that they struggle in, instead of putting judgment on them and saying, like, oh, why don't you know this? Or why can't you do this? Or why haven't you been taught this before? I feel like as a community, we have to stop looking at people with judgment, because it's not just in the classroom environment, it's in our community as well.
All right, so the last response that we will be going through today says, I am a girl who always wanted to learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his holy creation, the Ahlul Bayt alayhi wassalam, and wanted to be a good human who will reach his Khaliq by all divine success. But somewhere got distracted by things and thought it was right and was going right then. Then there were a lot of incidents that happened, which is an ultimate khair for me, and still happening with me. Then I got to know what it all actually means and why these things happened, or did happen. I felt and still sometimes feel tense and pain and grief, because now I'm allowing myself to accept what should be accepted in order to get divine success, because this is not easy to fight with yourself, but with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything can happen. And in my life, this is happening. I'm happy, and day by day myself is getting closer to divine calmness and peace. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I think this is a lighter sort of a response than the rest, right? I think she's briefly mentioned her whole journey.
I just think it's so nice to see a response where she's just put, or this person has just put all of their thoughts down as they're thinking it. Like we said, to just pour out whatever you're thinking, right? And she's also put it in a very positive perspective.
Yeah, and I think it actually tackles an important aspect, which is your own personal journey and your own personal research and education. And I feel like that's something important to discuss, because obviously a lot of us have inherited our deen, but we don't take the time to personally go out and like look for the right sources for our doubts, or research more into the religion, you know? And Muharram, it's a period of learning where we actually make time to sit down and listen to lectures and learn more about our religion and get closer to Allah, and actually put that effort into working on ourselves spiritually. So I feel like this personal aspect of education is really, really important.
No matter what we go through in life, like all the experiences that we just talked about, like in madrasa or anywhere where we have this spiritual trauma, when we take the time to ourselves and really just reflect and think about it and try and grow ourselves spiritually, that's where the growth is. That's where we can actually make a change and make a difference.
This was your dose of Raza Banter.
And until the next cup of tea,
which is part 2 of the Spiritual Trauma and Healing series, where we discuss the role of our communities in triggering spiritual trauma.
We hope you enjoyed.